Good afternoon. The time is now 3:30, and I'd like to open the meeting of the City of Norwood Planning Commission. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Mayor Snyder, Chairman Powers,
Present.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Present.
Mr. Hockney,
Present.
Mr. Sewer.
Present.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 1st, 2022 meeting?
I'll second that.
Who made it?
I need a first.
I'm sorry.
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hockney,
Okay, thank you.
second by Mrs. Sickinger. Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Right. This time, we'll close the regular meeting and open our first public hearing of the day. First public hearing is for the proposed zoning ordinance amendment relating to various chapters to promote clarity and consistency in policy, interpretation, application, processing, ease of use, readability, dealing with architectural projections, fences, and other related administrative type changes. Would anybody like to speak in favor of the proposed changes? Yes, sir.
I don't want to speak in favor or against. I've got something to kind of consider.
Please come to the mic.
I'm sorry. Anybody who'd like to speak, if you please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I'll say I do. Thank you.
When you get to the mic, please state your name.
Hi, I'm Cameron Kelly. I live at 4343 Floral Avenue. I'm assuming this is the ordinance regarding with fences, basically corner lot type issues to prevent things from having to go to the BZA that may not really need to go to the BZA, and adding a little more clarity there. I've got some handouts here. So I'll try to keep this short. I heard this was coming on the agenda, and my interest in architectural projections actually comes in the form of usually condensing equipment. I'm an HVAC contractor, and just recently quoted replacing someone's air conditioner that was on a corner lot, and was filling out the paperwork and didn't realize how hard it can be sometimes to replace an air conditioner on a corner lot and keep that family's quality of life. And what I mean by that is a lot of times the unit is in the side yard that faces the street, the cross street, so Norwood considers that to be the front yard as well, which we do not allow condensing units in the front yard. Our code, though, does make an exception saying they have to meet setbacks for the front yard, which front yard setbacks are like 25 feet, as I understand it, in a lot of these residential areas. So basically, it's saying that the AC unit needs to be 25 feet off the sidewalk, which we all can drive around and see there are lots of houses on corner lots with AC units that are not 25 feet from the sidewalk. And I don't know how many of these were installed prior to any resolution being passed, or whether they were installed without permits, but there's a lot of non-conforming AC units in this town. And picture yourself as a homeowner. I talk about this exact situation that happened. Someone comes, their air conditioner's on the fritz. At worst, it's down. It's 90 degrees outside. It's on the side of the house. Their back porch living or backyard is their outdoor living space, and the only choice that they have is to illegally replace their air conditioner and keep it in the side, or have it moved to the rear, which impacts their quality of life, noisy air conditioner right where your outdoor living space is. It kind of puts me as an HVAC contractor in a tough position. Do I illegally replace it without getting a variance first? And, you know, we're talking a month or 2 months to get a variance, and by that time heating season's passed. Most of the time, it's about an extra $1,000 to move the condensing unit to the back, even if that is an option. So that's kind of an undue burden that we're placing upon people. And I'm kind of just in a tough spot. And all I came to talk about this during this particular meeting, my reason for coming is I don't know whether now is the right time to consider looking at this, since we're already talking about corner lots and we're already talking about fences, we're already talking about architectural projections. I'm certainly not here to hold up progress. I love what you guys are doing, looking at these other issues, but I'm here basically asking for some consideration that if we're going to pass this, like, may it make sense to throw this in. I understand there's a lot of research that goes into things like this. I did talk to here about 6 municipalities: Wyoming, Deer Park, Cincinnati, St. Bernard, Newtown, Marymount, and Madeira. Madeira is the only one that comes close to us as far as being as restrictive. Their lots are generally larger there, though, I would say. Cincinnati's probably, and Cincinnati and St. Bernard are probably architecturally the closest to us, and they have no restrictions at all. You can even put them in the front yard in Cincinnati, which I do not think is a good thing, being able to put them in the front yard. But I'm just here to ask for some consideration. I also included some pictures of some existing installations, not meaning to pick on anybody or anybody's house in particular, just kind of showing, like, I drove around for 10 minutes and probably snapped 10 or 15 pictures of houses that were non-conforming. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of the ordinance? Anybody like to speak opposed? All right. Seeing none, ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
And can I have a motion to open the regular meeting for discussion on this topic?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay. I'll open the floor to anybody who'd like to talk here.
As far as Mr. Kelly's request, would it be a possibility that we could grandfather in existing air conditioning units legally?
Mike, do you know the answer to that?
I would have to investigate that further, but to me, if it was something that was, let's say, done illegally, it's hard to make that determination. If it was something that went through, obviously, the BZA, then that's automatically approved. I didn't get time to kind of research what has been the history with BZA for entertaining these sort of relief, but I think we had discussions. It's definitely in keeping with the architectural projections that we worked on in the current zoning ordinance. So,
The only comment I have, and that, again, it's only because of the BZA, my presence, and these haven't come in front of us very often. But when they do, and Mr. Kelly, I don't, it doesn't take 2 or 3 months. The process we use, you make an application, the following month it goes on there. So I understand that somebody's air conditioning's down, but I'd rather see, versus grandfathering, I'd rather see us do something like give Mark Reeves the ability to make these judgments like we are some other things. Because, I mean, an air conditioning unit, number one, there's limitations on where you can put it based on where the unit is. I know the lines, you can do it longer these days, but, so anyway, I'm more than happy to work with anybody who comes. Now, we will not allow it in the front yard. I mean, that's just a reality. But even on corner lots, and I know that we've got some language in here about primary and secondary, which we're making advancements, and I'd call it the primary or the front, but I think versus panicking and trying to do something to slow this ordinance down that we have in front of us tonight, I would rather look at this in the future of how can we remedy this, like we do front porches right now. Front porches, if somebody tears it off because it's in disarray, they don't have to come in front of BZA. Mark is able to handle that with the building department. So it seems like that's something that really does feel like more of how our staff or experience should be able to handle that decision and know when and when not to approve it. That'd be my recommendation. So versus trying to do a blanket grandfather, because there's some that break down that I'd like to see them have to move it. So that's the reason I'd rather not do that. Anyway, those are my comments. Noah, sorry to get you off track.
No, that's what we were here to do. I agree with a lot of what you said. I see some merit in taking a look at this issue, and maybe giving some of that extra decision-making authority to the folks in our building department to handle that on a case-by-case basis. But in terms of the ordinance we've got now, kind of the approach that we're taking here is giving council enough that they've got something really on their plate, but not trying to overload it. So we're going to be doing some more of these changes, as we know. We've even got it on our agenda for later, what sort of things we'd like to talk about making changes with our zoning ordinances going forward. So I think that this is probably something we ought to add to that discussion, but trying to stop the ordinance that we've got now so that we can do a revision on it and add this in, I'm not in favor of that. I'd like to get the ordinance that we've got. I think it's got a lot of things in it, and keep it moving forward so the council can look at it and make those changes.
And I don't know if I need to make a motion on this, but we have a section in here called new business. I'd be more than happy to say, make a recommendation, we put condensing units as a new business item, because almost everybody has a condensing unit these days.
On our old business, we do have a discussion of the next zoning ordinance amendment text priority, so I think that's something that we
Either
can look
there-
at right there in old business.
Either a new business, okay.
Any other discussion? All right. Seeing none, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the recommendation of the zoning ordinance text amendment as we have it before us today?
I'd like to make the motion, we make the, let me see, I haven't done this before. Make the recommendation that we propose to council the approval of the ordinance as presented to the planning commission.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay.
No, and I, just for clarification, that is what our position is. We recommend to council, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. That being said, I'd like to ask for a motion to close our regular meeting and open our second public hearing. May I have that motion?
Make the motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Okay, with that, we are open for our second public hearing, an initial review. Chase Davis Bowling Green Capital LLC, Andover Management Group, has made an application for a minor planned unit development. The subject lot has an area of .706 acres and is located on the west side of Smith Road, State Route 561, immediately north of the CarX Repair and Tire Shop. Lot is zoned as General Business District with a PUD overlay. This zone expressly permits Class A retail, which includes pharmacies. The Building and Law Departments interpret state licensed medical marijuana dispensaries as a pharmacy. Applicant is proposing a 3,630 square foot single-story commercial retail building with 26 parking stalls. Do we need to swear in folks, I believe, for this one?
Is there anybody new that came in that would like to speak to this agenda item? Okay, no, sir, we didn't.
Thank you, Mrs. Town. Okay, first I'd like to call anybody who would like to speak in favor of the planned use development amendment. Please state your name, sir.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, my name's Richard Tranter, and I'm an attorney with Dinsmore Scholl, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the applicant. I had a procedural question in the beginning because we have a presentation we were going to make, and this is in the public hearing phase, and I didn't know if this is where I should make the presentation or, and that Carrie, you're nodding yes. So the presentation, I have a team which I'll introduce, and I know it's not typical you do it in the public hearing setting, but we're flexible, and we'll present then with a number of speakers in sequence, unless you want us to sit and let people, the opponents, to go first. What is your preference?
You may proceed.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman Powers, I could not, and I'm a little bit deaf in one ear, I could not hear what you were reciting when the air conditioner came on, and I think it's an important sentence. You were mentioning the law department. I caught just part of that. Was that on the idea that the pharmacy is a permitted use, the dispensary is a permitted use?
Yeah, the Building and the Law Department interprets state licensed medical marijuana dispensaries as a pharmacy, which is permitted as a Class A retail item.
Right, and that's a significant fact, which is why we're in front of you here, and candidly why we're going to ultimately withdraw our application to the BZA as a conditional use. In terms of an overview, if you don't mind, I'll give you a little bit of a roadmap of where our presentation is going to go and the speakers, if you'll indulge me. With me is, and if you don't mind standing when I say your name, Chase Davis with the Andover Management Group, which is the development team. He's driven up from Louisville. Jenna Burge, who is with Aaron, which is the licensee on the dispensary license. They'll be the operator tenant. Tim Foster, who's our civil with IDE. Kevin Oliver with Oliver Architects, who is responsible for design. And I say that, begin, if we cover material that you feel needs a follow-up question, please feel free to ask what the question is. I'll make sure we get the speaker in front of you. Is that fair? Okay. Medical marijuana dispensary, recognized at state law, and we are the holder of a temporary dispensary license. I have a copy of it if you need it. I can even give you a reference. Again, what I'm trying to do is see how much I have to get into this because of the, I don't want to make the hearing too long. But I think these are just facts. And the law department has concluded we are a permitted use. That's actually consistent with most zoning jurisdictions. Medical marijuana is not recreational use. And I really want to make that distinction because that's, I think, significant maybe to some of the biases people may have historically to medical marijuana. So in the issue of the permitted use, this is the appropriate forum. So when I mentioned the BZA, initially at the direction of Mr. Bly, per a memo of like May 23rd, we were instructed to file 2 applications. And when you're directed by City Hall to do it, you do it. In retrospect, when the applicant came to me and asked me to look at the issue, I actually came to the same conclusion that your law department did. As remarkable as that sounds, we came to the same opinion that it is a permitted right. And that's a significant fact, by the way, because there was an application document that had to be completed by Norwood, which is completed by Norwood and sent to the Ohio State Department of Pharmacy, and they have to rely on that in order to issue the license. So I'm happy that that issue is settled, and it was correctly settled. We're really here on more conventional land use questions, the PUD issues that relate to your overlay. And there's not a specific, like Smith Road PUD. It's just we're in a PUD, and as Norwood's ordinances can do, they refer back to the general PUD guidelines. And in those guidelines, and if you think of that, if it's very general like that, it may not be the best overlay on a specific site. And hopefully we can demonstrate that. So the general guidelines, you cannot have a building further away than 10 feet. And I think that's probably the bias of Montgomery Road. Montgomery Road development has been very much up on the street frontage. But if you know this site, and I hope if I can describe it, certainly I have an aerial photograph, but we're adjacent to a CarX and a Midas. And both of those properties are at least 55 feet off of Smith Road. We're requesting a similar type of development pattern to be set back off, to be generally in line. We will be a little further back, taking advantage of the flatlands, the ridge there a little bit. But one of the things that I know that has been raised by Mr. Skelly correctly is that we're asking for a development pattern that would allow us to put the building back further than 10 feet from Smith Road. The other then, and it's sort of hand in glove, is that the parking can't be in the back because if you know that site, that terrain falls down. Plus, you would really disturb the Duck Creek area back there because it's a very severe terrain. And so hand in glove is to say we obviously want to have the parking in the front then. We want to use our front yard for the parking. And that's a significant PUD question that I'm going to ask you to resolve in our favor based on the development pattern that exists on Smith Road and the common sense of the terrain. We don't want to disturb the terrain any more than we would have to. The other issue was on residential screening. We submitted this morning, we had and I don't know, Mike, if you got it, the residential screening exhibit from our team. It came in probably around 12 o'clock. We do have multiple copies that we can hand out, but we do have a screening exhibit, which was something that I think you had requested properly, and we tried to address that. So we do have an exhibit that we can show you on that. And then also, there's a naked concrete wall, retaining wall, and we're open to ideas on that. The one omission in our application was that we did not provide a streetscape because we really did not know how to even address that. Smith Road from the entrance ramp on the 71 across Midas, across CarX, as you come across what were the two houses that were demolished. Again, that was the prior use. Those two homes are gone. As you come down into the state right-of-way property where the retention area is in the city, there really is no streetscape plan there. And the reason I said we did not address it because we would be an island in terms of doing streetscaping. That doesn't mean we don't want to address it here. And we would solicit general concepts, like if you want to have benches or potting, like pots with flowers or something. But we just did not know it because there is no streetscape really guidance for that little section. Or the other thing we were going to propose is if you wish to do more of a macro study of it from Midas to CarX to us, and including the state of Ohio site, more of that linear distance than just our frontage, we would gladly participate in that. And we would trust that as long as it's everybody's contributing proportionately or equally, we would have no problem with that. But I do want to say that we do not have a streetscape plan, and we were confounded by, we didn't know what we were proposing, and we hope that in the hearing we could just address that with you by concept. Or if you want to defer it to some kind of a study group or Scully, Mr. Scully, we would do that too. But there is that omitted document. But we did submit all the other documents, the lighting, the landscaping, the business plan. There were like a series of documents that were submitted. So hopefully you have a good sense of our development. Now, what I would like to do is just, again, I'm always watching the board members to see if I'm giving you too much information or too little. So if I could, I would like to bring first the civil up, let him discuss the site plan in general, and then we'll move to design with Kevin, and hopefully we'll give you the site plan characteristics And then we're open to any questions. And I'll stand by the mic only because I'll be watching you to see if you're giving me the look to say you've got enough or if you have a question. Is that fair? It's been a while since I've been back to Norwood. There was a 10-year period where I thought I was living here.
So did I.
So again, I want to be respectful of any current protocols. I do recognize some faces here, so hopefully you'll understand why I was saying that. Okay.
Hi, my name is Timothy Foster. I'm with IDE. We are civil engineer assisting the team. And from the outset, I attempted to work with Mike Skelly and staff here to identify the most critical items to how this site plan can be developed. What can be done with the site, because we have significant grade change from the east side to the west side and significant grade change from our site to Williams. One of the first things that came up was, how is this site going to access Smith Road? Because of the where current accesses were with those old uses. And we had some extensive coordination with Mr. Skelly and Carrie, Ms. Sound, and actually got some feedback from the city engineer for Norwood. And they recommended to try to have our access connect to the signalized intersection that's currently there at our southeast corner of our site that serves the garage to the east. So that was their primary recommendation, and we did everything that we could to tailor our site plan to make that happen. They also allowed for, in their guidance, they allowed for a secondary right-in, right-out on the north side of the property for a second entrance. Obviously, they wouldn't allow that to be a full access. That was their allowance as far as guidance is concerned. So that's exactly what we proposed. So we were trying to be very much in line with their recommendations. Now, that decision about where that access was going to be was going to control the entire layout of the site because of grade change, because of several other factors that very much informed our need to have the building setback, where we were going to drop the pavement, how we were going to handle the fact that the site drops 10 feet when you're looking at it from the road, from the north to south entrance. So that dictated a lot of our design. As far as pedestrian access, there was a comment about pedestrian access, and while we will definitely have that continuation of the public sidewalk along the street, we have added a small sidewalk that can make sure that there is easy access across our driveways, and we can share that as well if we would like to now. Sure. And then as far as landscaping is concerned, the landscape plan that was submitted to your packets at the outset did not show the exact planting plan for the western side of the site where we had proposed a landscape buffer. But I do have a document here that we had shared earlier today, and I know that's very late, but a document that shows a planting plan for that western buffer, just to show that we are doing everything we can to attempt to be in line with the needs there. And that would screen us from the residential and Duck Creek to the west. Now, we also shared with Mr. Skelly and the city engineer consultant the traffic estimates that would pertain to this, and that went into the city engineer's recommendations on how we would have access to the signalized intersection. And there will need to be traffic design for that intersection to allow us to access there, but we have enough frontage so that that signalized access should allow us to access the road there.
I'm sorry, did you say that that intersection would need to be redesigned?
The signalized intersection would need to be redesigned, yes, to allow for this site to access, be controlled access by that signal.
Thank you.
If you're good,
That's,
they may have questions.
yep, I'm open for any questions you have on the development of the site plan.
And again, Mr. Oliver will speak to design, show you some elevations and schema.
let me just, Mike, I haven't seen the traffic impact.
So,
I do have some questions about that. Who actually looked at it? I understand they've submitted it, but
correct, so as part of the application submission for this, we did not receive like a TIS officially. So I think the engineer did generate some numbers using the ITE standard. I don't know if you guys are preparing one or are considering it. I'm not too sure of the status, so I'll let you answer that first and then I'll finish the response.
So our understanding and our belief is that there will definitely need to be counts and design done for modifying that signalized intersection. But the initial guidance we've been receiving is that the use itself wouldn't necessarily require a TIS, so that if we can demonstrate in a modified signal that this would handle the traffic, then that would account for it. So the guidance so far has been that a TIS isn't required based on the land use, but obviously we will have to redesign the signal using traffic information.
Yeah. So, and it was discussed earlier, so there has been, over the past couple of months, discussion between myself, Dan Bly, JMA, the city's engineer. So there was no definitive, we have to have this, either by the engineer yet or by Dan Bly. So, as you heard, the applicant is looking for either the planning commission making that request, and say we really want to see that. The only thing, at least we have seen, and whether it's coming from John Godey or from myself, I believe for the AM peak hour generation, it was under 100 trips per hour. So over the years, as I've learned, that's kind of one of three major red flags that would trigger a TIS. So as it was below that, that kind of was persuasive, saying, hey, we don't need it yet, but it probably would be forthcoming. Aside from also the daily trips being considerably lower than 1,500. But I think the key thing was generating is changes to the signalized intersection, and more importantly, its proximity to the on-ramp. So I think this use may not in itself, because of its size, trigger a TIS, but it has other prevailing issues that do warrant a TIS.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that topic? All right.
He's available. I mean, he's not going anywhere. So, yeah. Kevin? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kevin Oliver, principal with Oliver Architecture. I'm going to take this opportunity to go over the exterior design of the dispensary and some of its features.
Tim, would you mind holding?
So the dispensary is a relatively small building on the site and oriented north-south. The main entrance is on the north end, where the waiting area and the sales area proper are. The western half, for lack of a better term, is the back of house service space where product is received, inventoried, all of the stuff that has to happen to satisfy the state regulations requirements for safety and security and patient care. We've articulated the plan of the building on the site to give some ins and outs, for lack of a better term, facing the street, as well as the rear-facing portion of the building, with the entrance being large areas of glazing to let natural light in and promote visibility, and then continuing that pattern of windows throughout the rest of the building itself. On the left of this sheet is the secure delivery area, and so that is in conjunction of where our dumpster and utility space will be. The fencing there will be a continuation of the same material as the exterior of the building, so it'll be a fiber cement siding. It won't be chain link or anything else that has that utilitarian appearance to it, moving to the west there. Sidewalk entry on the front with small areas of landscaping where possible, and some overhanging canopy to provide shelter. We have a traffic flow pattern where patients enter and then flow into the dispensary after being screened and accepted, and then they exit through a separate exit to the same entry and exit area. I'm going to grab an elevation here. Maybe before we do that, let's show this perspective view. So the building is massed sort of in three sections, reflecting some of the interior workings of it. So the entry reception area has a higher brick exterior elements. The central dispensary section is clad in sort of a weathered gray, modern stacked bond pattern fiber cement with a rain screen behind it to promote drainage and longevity, as well as accents of black powder-coated steel, black storefront windows, insulated glazing, that again continues across the building. So these materials extend all the way around the building. They don't drop off on the backside or on the inside. So we're trying to create a first-class exterior building for our dispensary, and really a destination that people will be willing and ready to use on that particular site. There's the front one. So again, in two dimensions, you can see sort of the delineation of the brick material and the fiber cement material, as well as the storefront. Our parapets extend high enough up to screen our rooftop equipment. We have exterior accent lighting that again happens on the front, as well as the ends and the sides of the building there, and the canopy coming around. Maybe the last one here. Do a 180 for me. Thanks. Again, this is the rear elevation with materiality and design continuing all the way around. And then the end here is within the service yard, kind of facing the building at the product entrance, utility yard portion of the building, but continues that same brick material on that end around the building there. So that's kind of a basic overview. I'm happy to answer questions about exteriors or design, anything like that.
I actually have a question for my architect, because it was something I was paying attention to when I drove the site. I drove down to Duck Creek and got out of my car and stood, and obviously there's a significant grade there. So the question I had asked was, what is the difference in height between the finished floor area and Duck Creek? And I think your answer, or Tim's answer, maybe it would have been you, Tim. Yeah, Tim, come back up. Because obviously when you look down on it, it looks like it's all at the same grade level, but there's a significant grade difference between Duck Creek. So what is the difference in the finished floor area? Is a range, like from the corner to corner to Duck Creek?
We're talking 30 feet from Smith at our southeast corner down to Duck Creek in the rear.
Right. And we're not going to change the grade substantially. I guess I'm talking about the grade in the back.
The western half of the site will remain undisturbed. That area in the back, we're really trying to focus everything on the front,
Right. And
east half of
can
it.
you describe what's on that western hillside?
There's severe grade change that's heavily vegetated. There is a retaining wall there, but we're trying to avoid disturbing that wall, and the area to the west, it's grown up, and we will try not to disturb areas that would eat away our structural support.
The site is a challenge. That's why this is, I think, a great balancing as a land use lawyer, because you're getting a significant use in terms of economic development, but it is not. Honestly, it's not as large as a Walgreens. A Walgreens is 10 or 14,000 square feet. This is, and I should let you testify. I don't want to be the fact witness. The square footage of the building is approximately, somebody fill in the blank.
Sorry, approximately 3,600 square feet.
Right. So it's a relatively small building footprint, and it's in line, common sense. And I'm going to submit some photos here. It is in line generally with the Midas and the Carax. And if I could, I do want to submit those photos to you. If you give me 1 second. Not being too formal, but I'm submitting an aerial photograph that shows the Midas, the Carax, and it actually shows the 2 older homes that were there that are now demolished. And it's not a perfect overlay, but again, I think that it'll give you I've got multiple copies there. It'll help demonstrate how it's a tight site and it fits well on the site, and it is in line with, again, the development pattern there, albeit it's not consistent with your PUD regs it's got to be within 10 feet. And I think the distinction, again, I think the PUD regs were more addressing probably Montgomery Road and areas that were already built with the buildings right up on the street frontage. Jenna? Can you come up, present? This will be my last presenter. And when Jenna's done, I was going to ask, I know there is counsel here for the property owner across the street in opposition. I was just handed his report in opposition. I have not had a chance to look at it. I would normally address that in my presentation if I knew what the issues were. But I would just ask if I have an opportunity to come back up and address points that would be raised against the project from the opposition side, with your permission.
We're going to have each side just speak once today.
Okay.
Then we'll have some discussion if we have a need to do follow-up discussions at a future meeting.
I only bring it up because it's candidly, it puts me at a huge disadvantage. And it was just submitted like 5 minutes before the hearing. So I did check with Mr. Skelly yesterday and today, and as late as 12 noon, asking had anything been submitted at the file. But hey, it's zoning law. I understand it. It's rough and tumble world. But I wish I could have had a chance because I don't want any misstatements made or mischaracterizations. So anyway, that's why I would like to bring up Jen. So Jen, I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask some questions.
I need a speaker card, please.
Yes, Jennifer Burge, you have my card?
No, I don't.
Did you give it to me?
There's one over here.
I walked it up. I put it on the corner, Carrie. It's probably right there. Sorry about that, Carrie.
Sure.
Good?
Thank you, Carrie. My name is Jenna Burge, and I actually represent the operational side of the planning. So what you have seen are the drawings and the look, the execution, the aesthetic. A couple of things worth noting. As we're looking at that development, it was brought up that there were 2 abandoned homes previously. We are looking to put in this dispensary at that location. And the way I'm looking at it is, from a community standpoint, we are, 1, filling a space that had nothing in it, 2, providing jobs, not only at a management level, but also at that hourly rate, along with career development and specialized training in those areas. So looking at the overall impact from a community standpoint, it's a huge positive for us to be able to move into that area and take over operations.
If you would allow me, I'd like to ask some questions.
Sure.
Anticipating if you're not familiar, because I candidly became more familiar with one of the marijuana dispensaries. Is there any on-site use,
No.
room, or design?
No, none whatsoever.
And that includes in the parking lot?
Absolutely, none whatsoever, along with, appropriate signage in and outside.
And the product that's sold, it is packaged, correct?
Absolutely. By the state regulations, and it's actually labeled with that patient's name from the order. So not only is it sealed, labeled per the requirements of the state, it is then actually labeled once again, completely unsealed, put in a bag and handed to the patient. So at no time is there any product outside.
And this was the most interesting, unlike if you went to Walgreens and you got an over-the-counter, or even something as severe as more of OxyContin or something like that, there's a unique statutory doctor-patient relationship.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So with every state is different. Obviously, within the state of Ohio, once you actually go to a physician that is on that approved list and you have one of the qualifying conditions through your doctor, you are then able to apply for a medical marijuana card. Once you receive that card, then you are able to come to our facility. Until then, because it is not recreational use, specifically medical, you cannot even access our facility without that patient identification card or as an actual badged employee of the dispensary itself.
In effect, you register.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
you can keep tracking of the patient's
Yes.
relationship, which is.
They
very
cannot
neat.
access if the card is expired. That is all handled by the state. So there really isn't a lot of wiggle room in order for you to not have a card and enter our facility.
If you have any questions.
Who issues the license? I know nothing about, I'm saying this because I really don't know anything about it. Who issues all this stuff? Where does it come from? I mean, all these cards, is it like most things we have the government take care of? It's done very well? Being sarcastic?
No sarcasm at all. That's not even my style. No, honestly, it actually is a pretty seamless program compared to other states. Ohio does have the regulations together, and the way they handle everything is wildly impressive.
My doctor, Paul,
Yeah.
says, you have a severe case of whatever, I'm going to recommend you get medical marijuana. How does that work? What happens? He gets a card? I get a card? He's already been licensed?
So from that doctor, from that recommendation, with one of the qualifying diseases or ailments
You've shared all
on
that
your
on
list,
the
yes,
list.
on your list, you then actually have to apply through the state to get your card. That card is individual to you. It has a patient number
Okay.
that is specific to you in the state of Ohio, is non-transferable, and when it expires, you have to go through the permitting all over again. So it behooves the holder to keep track. And the state is also very good at sending those emails for usually a 60 to 90-day reminder so that it doesn't expire.
Okay.
And for the record, I only brought one extra copy, but I'm going to submit it in the record. It's the Notice of Award of Provisional Dispensary License. It was issued May 17th, 2022, and it has application FJ 996, and this is the actual provisional license, and I'm just going to submit this into the record. Sorry.
So it's not you don't have a permanent license yet? I'm just...
No. To answer your question, I think that I would like to have probably Chase or Jen. I don't want to start guessing on the status. I don't want to guess. Okay, Chase, introduce yourself.
Hi, Chase Davis, represent the Ownership and Development, Bowling Green Capital. Just quickly, once you go through the application process with the Board of Pharmacy, as the operator has done, if your application is approved and you met all of the criteria of the state, the regulation body, then the regulating body, the Board of Pharmacy, issues a provisional dispensary license. And once they issue that provisional dispensary license, you have to get open, be inspected by the regulatory bodies, inspectors, and then at that point they will grant you a certificate of operation, and then dispensary operations commence.
And they put a little structure to it. The way the statutory scheme works is there's an initial identification of permitted sites, which is why I have to keep emphasizing that. So that there's a formal application sent to Norwood. Norwood fills that out. They send it back to the state. Then that becomes a trigger mechanism. And then, of course, the state makes selections based probably on a lot of criteria, which I'm not going to pretend I know. And then you're awarded the dispensary license. And then, so then that's a green light where we start spending a lot more money on design and engineering to go forward. So that's where we are in the process, and it's a statutory process. It's not like unique to us. Everybody's going through this. Some people went through earlier. You know, I hope that answers your question.
It did.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, if they have more questions.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good, thank
You sure? Okay. If I could leave you with this, one thing I want you to take away is everything that we do is regulated by the Board of Pharmacy. So it is highly controlled. Every cannabis product that we get is from a seed to sale system tracked throughout the state. So the product itself, the people, the building, everything we do is wildly regulated. So the parameters are tight from a law enforcement. Thank you.
And just in summation, I think hopefully you have a sense of the professional team that comes with this kind of an investment. So again, they're here for any questions. I know I'm going to give up the floor here. I'm batting down the hatches, but if a question does come up, please direct it to us. If I may even have to object if I hear something that's crazy. So please bear with me, because I've never been in a position where I can't rebut what I don't know. So anyway, I don't want to ruin the decorum of the meeting.
I have a couple questions about
Sure.
the building itself. So this is outside of our typical setback?
Right.
What's the reason for that, or the rationale for that?
For the setback?
Yeah.
Well, for the engineer, I don't want to be the fact witness on that.
Yeah, it's Tim Foster again. So the question is related to why the setback from Smith Road for this specific building. And that was, we went through a rigorous process of trying to look at several different iterations of how we could put the building on the site, get the parking that was necessary, and maintain that southern access point to the signalized intersection. And based on several different building iterations and parking iterations, the only way we found as an engineer to have the building on the site was to have the parking in the front, a taller foundation wall on the building in the rear, and this allowed for the secondary access to the north. So it was really the site that dictated where we could put the building.
I'd like to ask a question of you. Is this a decision that was made in a day, a week, a month?
This was probably 4 to 6 weeks of going through several iterations with the development team on what we could accomplish.
Okay. And I one other question kind of on the site. This is a pretty significant sized parking area. Have you looked at what that potential rain runoff may do to the folks behind that property?
So we believe that because we are going to be installing new stormwater management in the northwest corner, and it will absolutely, address all the stormwater management rules and regulations of the city, but that water will be actually less water than is there currently. It will have to be designed to pre-development rates, and that would be entering the MSD sewers in that rear location. There's some rather large sewers back in that area, but the vast majority of the water will be controlled except for these major rain events. But yeah, I don't foresee that as a problem at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? All right. I'd like to ask anybody who'd like to speak in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Hello. My name is Steve Gooden. I'm a partner at the law firm Graydon, Head and Ritchie, and I represent Matrix LLC. It's a holding company that owns and operates the Cornerstone development at 4000 Smith Road, which is directly across the street. And I want to begin in a way that's probably unusual. I do want to begin by apologizing. We did submit a written summation of the nature of our objections. Those were not delivered until before the meeting here. We did email them to the law department earlier this afternoon. That is an apology that I'd like to make. I understand what this is like. I serve on the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission as the city's representative. I served for more than a year on the City of Cincinnati City Council, where we have the final say in the city on zoning matters, so I know how frustrating it can be to get the information late. But I do hope you will take a look at it. There was some back and forth, obviously, among the tenants and other business owners on that site as to how and whether they should make their opposition known. So, but in any event, I do hope you consider it, and I do want to highlight a few things here for you today to consider. And our biggest message, I suppose, is
Mr.
please.
Gooden?
Yes.
I really need you to enunciate with the air conditioner on. I'm having, the microphone up here is not picking up what you're saying, please. I apologize for the interruption.
Okay, I'll sum up. I think you should deny this one because the business owners across the street at the Cornerstone development feel they've been totally cut out of the process, and we feel that your zoning code requires you to take a look at the bigger picture here. Okay, and I've been on the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission and on the City Council in Cincinnati myself, and have made these sorts of calls, and I urge you to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is this. The state of Ohio has issued 70 new provisional medical marijuana licenses. That means there will likely be 70 new dispensaries throughout the state of Ohio, and it looks as though Norwood and the Norwood area is going to get more than its share. If they are all approved, you're going to end up with 6 dispensaries between Pleasant Ridge and Hyde Park, including another one that's going to be coming your way, another application coming your way on Montgomery Road up by Stony Lanes. You're going to have a veritable marijuana district, and that puts folks like my client at Matrix, who are running the Cornerstone development, in a very bad place. They have, they took over that property in 2018. It's 240,000 square feet of Class A office space. They have, everything from Wells Fargo to Republic Bank to dermatology groups and medical offices and things of that nature, 445 highly compensated employees. It also sits on top of a public parking garage. It was built by a TIF in 2001, so it will be public for until 2031. And that is a concern as well, which I want to reach out to about parking. But in the meantime, they're concerned what this will do to their business. They're concerned what this will do to the area. They're concerned whether or not they will be able to continue to attract tenants, including the kind of high-quality national corporate tenants that they have. And as I read Section 11728, economic detriment to the community is absolutely something that this commission and the BZA should consider before granting a conditional use or whatever the application ultimately should be. So I guess our primary issue is to please consider the bigger picture. Please look at the other dispensaries that may be coming. Please evaluate the types of businesses that come with these dispensaries. I note we are not taking any issue with this business or this business model. We've checked it out. They have a provisional license that was issued by the state of Ohio. There is no question there, and we're not going to in any way insinuate that they are bad operators within this space. That is what the law in Ohio allows. However, municipalities do have a large amount of leeway under Ohio law in terms of what they do or do not allow. Indeed, Ohio Revised Code 379629 allows home rule municipalities like Norwood to either limit or totally prohibit and rule out medical marijuana dispensaries. I'd also like you to think in terms of the bigger picture that we're talking about here too. What happens if recreational marijuana is legalized in Ohio? I mean, there is some talk, there's a lot of chatter out there that in 2024 that may be on the statewide ballot. If indeed it does pass, I would argue that Norwood would be without argument in terms of limiting those kinds of facilities based upon this sort of unofficial marijuana district that we're going to see here if this goes through. So I would ask you to consider the precedent that you might be setting by moving forward in this way. As I alluded to before, it's just simply unfair. It's unfair to the tenants. It's unfair to Mayfair. and it's unfair to everyone involved in terms of what this may do economically and how difficult it may be to attract and keep these sorts of long-term tenants who are providing, I mean, the property taxes alone in 2022 on the Cornerstone Matrix complex are almost $600,000 a year, and that's not even counting what these highly compensated doctors and other folks, of whom there are nearly 500, are paying an income tax to the city of Norwood. And lastly, sir, to Mr. Skelly's point, the traffic concerns are a real concern, and that is why I mentioned the TIF public garage that is incorporated into the Cornerstone property. It's a big deal potentially. As I read the pro forma that was attached to the application, there is at least a capacity for 1,000 customers per day at this new dispensary, 1,000. I know that's not the estimate. I know the estimate is significantly lower, but there is that capacity allowing for 15-minute average visits. There's no way that would not change in a very negative way the very character of that interchange. There is no way that would not have a drastic impact on that, like there's a single traffic light there. It currently does not line up with the proposed entrance and egress for the new dispensary. And moreover, our concern is if this volume does hit this place, and the pro forma calls for $9 million in sales by 2024, if all of that is accurate, we have no reason to doubt it is inaccurate, then you have a very real possibility of spillover parking from the dispensary in the public parking in the Cornerstone garage, which could create a significant pedestrian safety hazard of folks trying to park there and get over to the dispensary with no crosswalk, with no sidewalk, and trying to get that way. So not only will we have potential traffic issues, we would have pedestrian safety issues. So at a minimum, I know there were some internal standards that suggested that a traffic study might not be necessary here. We believe it is an absolute necessity. And even if this commission is to disagree on every other point that we've raised today in terms of what this will mean to the Cornerstone tenants, in terms of what this might mean in terms of future medical marijuana licenses or recreational licenses, at a minimum, we would ask that you, as some would say, slow your roll for a minute and consider a traffic study, either as a condition or just frankly, I think we need a traffic study here before we can evaluate this more fully. That is the sum and substance of our position. I have Emmy Rittenhouse here today, who's one of the principals at Matrix, who would, I guess, like to briefly address this body as well. And certainly we're available for other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great. My name is Emmy Rittenhouse. I am a senior asset manager for Matrix Holdings, which is the managing member of Cornerstone Office Partners, LLC, the legal ownership entity of Cornerstone at Norwood, the two office buildings, along with Mayfield that is part of the total development. When we received the notice of this hearing, our first concern was just keeping up with the quality of the area. I oversee all the leasing at Cornerstone. In 2021, despite COVID and everyone saying that office was dead, we had great leasing. We took it from about 60% occupied to now we're at 94%. We did some major deals with the plastic surgery group relocating from Red Bank Road, Axia Women's Health, and a couple others, and Health Carousel expanding significantly. So we're now at 94% occupied and feeling great about that. We mainly, the main driver to Cornerstone is the location, as in everything with real estate's location, location, location. Specifically for Cornerstone, it's the ease of accessibility on and off the highway. And it's the submarket, the Rookwood near, which is very much how we advertise it. It's Rookwood near. When it's nice out, you'll see people walking along over the overpass to go to lunch at Rookwood Exchange. So to add the traffic that this dispensary would very likely bring, makes our job a lot harder and potentially impossible to continue to maintain this high occupancy that we have worked hard to get to. And again, just touching on the pedestrian traffic, I personally, on lunch breaks and after work, will go jogging, and I cross over Smith Road and go around the Norwood neighborhood. And it's already pretty trafficky there, and people tend to forget about the light, not frequently, but maybe once or twice a week, people will just drive right through that traffic signal in front of our entrance. So it's already kind of a hairy area, and to add up to 1,000 customers across the street feels untenable. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll ask if there's a motion to close the public hearing and a motion to open the regular meeting for discussion.
So moved. I move to close public hearing and open up for a regular meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Turn it over to you three for the first bite on making comments.
I do understand the concern about the traffic in that area because I live around the corner and I see it all the time. So I do understand that concern. But I think that there should be ways around it too. I think perhaps a traffic study might be a good idea, and perhaps new walkways to make it safe. I think that there are ways that we could achieve that. So I think that's valid. I do feel that's valid. I don't know what the solutions are, though. Immediately, I didn't have this in front of me. So I don't know what the solutions are, but I'd love to do a little more research and maybe look at other areas that have made it safe walkway.
Me? No, agree that a traffic study would be very important. As she stated, the area is already very hairy. Surprised there hasn't been a lot more wrecks there than there are at the moment. But everything I was hearing sounds more the concern about the clientele that it's going to be bringing in to give a bad image to Cornerstone. Is it about the type of business that's going in and the possibility of it becoming recreational? Or is it just the fact of it being a medical dispensary? That's what I'm unsure of. So,
Bernie?
I guess I'm more on the engineering side. When I saw the proposal, who's going to pay for the traffic being reworked? It's got to be reworked coming out of Cornerstone. I don't see how that's going to work. But again, I'm a civil engineer. I pour concrete. I don't know enough about, engineering studies. But it seems complex. The in-out seems complex. And the queuing up that could occur down at Duck Creek and Smith even makes it worse. To me, I think a traffic study, impact study needs to be done on behalf of really all not just Matrix, but everybody in that area. I think all of us here probably have an opinion about the business use. But again, this is now state-approved law. I mean, and we have a law director who said it's the same as a pharmacy. I don't, again, we could all disagree with that too, but Class A has certain our zoning code has certain acceptances. So I can't really say that just because I don't feel right about it being in my city, I think there's going to be other ones in my city, whether or not I like it or not.
I think we need to stay in our lane.
So I'm more about the waste, the stormwater would concern me because every place we go in Norwood floods. So, are there any credits? I don't know all the things, and I doubt if you've gotten submissions on any of that because they're not ready to do that detailed work till it advances to the next step. But the utilities and the traffic are my two big issues as I sit here today that I can actually say from a planning commission standpoint. So I'll just stop there.
I agree with what you all said about the traffic. especially as you come off of 71, coming north into town, you kind of hit that area that's not the light that we're talking about, but the next one where everybody has to get over one lane because we then have parking. So what we would do is we're going to end up in a situation where we have a lot of folks who want to turn left into this dispensary, so everyone will get in the right lane, and then have to go to the left lane again to get back down Smith Road. So we're going to be forcing traffic left and right there. I have concerns about that. And then, like you said, folks backing up on Smith Road to Duck Creek, I think there could be an issue there as well. That's not as bad with a right in and a right out, but that intersection there at Cornerstone is obviously going to need to be studied, I think, and evaluated. So, my recommendation would be that we table any discussion or any decision on this until we have a traffic study that shows what that impact is going to look like, what's going to have to be done to re-engineer that intersection to make it work.
So no, I think the only concern I have right now is we're at a case right now when you talk about taking counts, I think they could be skewed because of this whole flexible work environment. I mean, traffic's not nearly as bad. I mean, it's getting there. I mean, those of us that travel 71. But I just don't know how we'd have to see how the traffic engineers are doing that today. Mm-hmm. Probably the civil engineer here knows exact, but with the occupancy being different than what it was designed for, even though occupancy's at 94%, that doesn't mean you're 94% in place. I mean, I get that. So anyway, all those things, I agree with everything you just summed. No, so I'll stop talking.
So I think what we would ask is that the applicant provide a traffic study that would look at what the impact can be and how that intersection would need to be engineered to allow access in and out of that site through that signalized intersection. Would you all agree?
I agree.
Okay. With that, I'd like to ask for a motion to table this discussion until our next meeting.
I second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I second that.
I made the motion.
You made the motion. Okay. Chairman Powers?
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinter?
Yes.
Mr. Hockney?
Yes.
Mr. Sewer?
Yes.
So the motion was to table it to the next meeting?
That's correct.
I'm sorry. The next meeting is August 3rd at 3:30. I say that as a time and date certain so that anybody who wants to be there can. It will not be sent out again by the city. It will not be notified by the city. Yes, sir?
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes, sir.
Respecting your submittal deadlines, can we have some latitude? In other words, we're obviously, any delay is actually significant to us. So if we get you a traffic study, what would be your submittal delay, or can you give us some latitude? I mean, obviously, I was handed my opposition report 5 minutes before the hearing.
We don't have an opposition report.
No, I know. I respect that. But I'm just saying is, Mr. Scully, can you give us like a realistic, like if we got a report to you, I know you got packets you probably have to send out. If we got them to you, like, it's a question. I'm not Dick. I'm really asking.
Sure, and I'll have to kind of at least preface it by saying, really, it's going to have to come in here and then immediately go out to JMA, who's the consulting engineer for the city. And also then, I think the communication flow would likely be between John.
It's John Godey, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what.
But that's what I'm saying. I think John Godey would have to then speak with the chief building official, Dan Bly, who's really responsible for the interpretation of this document. So I don't know the timing to produce that document. So obviously, there's some work already went involved into discussion so far. But I would like to think, hopefully JMA could probably receive it, evaluate it, and have, draft comments available within 30 days, I would think.
Are they open to any reputable traffic consultant, or does it have to be JMA?
JMA is who the city uses to review what you submit to us. We're
Right,
not-
but I know they use TEC also as
No,
their
we
sub.
do not.
Oh, you do not?
You'd have to ask the director, but I've never sent anything to anybody but JMA.
Right.
We send everything to JMA. There are occasions where JMA will utilize TEC.
Okay.
But you don't have a problem with the applicant using.
They do whoever they want.
Whoever they would like.
Right, okay, so Mike, I thought maybe you were directing me that I had to go to JMA to get a approved consultant. So we can choose a reputable consultant, we'll probably pay to work, get them work hard, and then we'll get it to you. And we'll probably give you a sense of timing when it's coming in, knowing that you got to get packets out and you got to get review and all that. I think that's what you were qualifying. You were saying you got to get it reviewed also.
Well, and again, in fairness to Carrie, to prepare just to make sure it gets distributed, so.
Okay.
Anything that you guys could work out, help each other, obviously, it helps everyone, so.
Okay, I think that's fine. We'll have our people follow up with your people.
So what I'm hearing is you don't think that you'll have time to get your traffic study done, get it to me so that it can go out to JMA and Dan and be on the meeting for the next meeting?
No, I'm not saying that. I just don't know what the deadline is. Like, does JMA need 2 weeks or do they need a week? We're just trying to get a sense of timing because we're going to obviously be on the phone talking to somebody to get something scheduled, and then we'll play into your schedule. I was just asking if there's some latitude there, or are they going to go on vacation? Is it, I just.
Yeah.
I've done traffic studies in Norwood, working with John. He turns things over very quickly. I think the bigger issue is your engineer working with your traffic study engineer, getting the proper counts, that the loads can actually be calculated correctly.
No, you're on track.
You have to set that timeline up, get it back to Carrie or to Mike.
Right.
And I think we can then get with John.
Yeah.
But it really will
Talk to
stem from you talking to your traffic study to how fast can they get counts and do all the calculations for the impact.
I was just saying, Tim.
I mean, you've got the drawing of what you're proposing.
Right.
So
I would anticipate Tim, he'll call you. Are you?
Yeah,
tomorrow?
maybe collectively, we establish 10 days before August 3rd as a courtesy to let Carrie know and to say, where are we?
That's good. Just give us some framework, because again, we may be making a cost benefit of somebody saying, oh, I got to work 3 weeks versus 2 weeks. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody on that question.
Just gonna give it to me in 14 days, right?
Okay. Moving on to old business, item D1, ongoing zoning ordinance amendment and review. And we won't be offended if you all want to leave.
It's so cool in here. Thank you.
Thank you all for showing up today. Next item is a discussion of draft policy for permeable porous paving.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we had this at our last meeting, is that correct? We did. Now that we're fortunate to have Mr. Skelly back with us to review the pervious and porous paving systems policy. Mike, is there anything that you want to highlight on it, or would you like us to just jump into questions?
No, again, so the draft policies, I guess initially were distributed back in, the May meeting. And I apologize for missing the last one. But at this point, between information that was provided by Dana Bowl, information that was provided, through meetings, stuff that we were researching, obviously Bernie was contributing with regards to his expertise. What you see in front of you is a draft policy that's fairly brief, and essentially it breaks it down to fairly minor porous paving, where chief building official could make a determination and then approve it as such. And then a secondary one where anything above 15 stalls would have to require the city engineer to get involved, and then they could figure out what's appropriate. And the 15 stall threshold was used as identical to what we require for more robust parking lot landscaping or planting islands. So that's why 15 stalls was used. But, you know, maybe a lower one is appropriate. What I have found difficult to nail down, having some idea with regards to stormwater management, is with regards to how Ohio approaches stormwater management. Some states are very strict with regards to what's the trigger point for these things. So the city does not have its own stormwater management ordinance. So to me, without getting an engineer's input, I didn't have anything to say, hey, this is where you really need to do it or should do it. So I used the 15 stalls of leapfrog policy, and then beyond that, let the chief building official and the city engineer work it out.
Mike, I believe this was based on the Minneapolis ordinance, is that correct?
Yeah, it was probably, you know, kind of a jambalaya or stew, because I just grabbed from wherever I could, so.
Any questions for Mike?
Mike, I didn't bring my copy, unfortunately, but I just remember it from last meeting.
Sure.
And I think Noah clarified it for me. You had something about a topping in here that I just...
Is that the turf geocell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see the minutes Carrie provided me, so there was some discussions on that. And to me, at least that product is probably similar to what's at, what's the Italian restaurant,
Sorrento's?
They were kind of using essentially some sort of concrete block matrix, and then you would have a void in it for a mixture of stone and soil. And that, at least my definition of a geocell. Now, when you Google it, you sometimes come up with these plastic mesh things, which are not something appropriate that you have a car sitting on, but they use that as a wall structure for building up the grid. But obviously, that can't sustain the weight of a vehicle. So
I'm good. I'm good. Let's move on. I'm fine. I just couldn't, I forgot to bring it with me.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. Would we like to have Mike prepare a draft ordinance regarding this subject? Do we need any other additional changes, any other discussion on it?
Not from me. I think this is definitely, with our stormwater issues we have here, I think this is just good for the city. And other cities are doing it. It's not like we're unique. I mean, it's...
Okay. Mike, if you would discuss with the law department creating a draft ordinance, and if time allows, for us to do the public hearing at our next meeting in August on this subject, and hopefully we can keep this one moving.
Okay.
If not, we'll aim for our September meeting. Any additional discussion on that item? Seeing none. Next item under old business. Memorandum from Mike Skelly regarding row homes and townhouses and proposed zoning ordinance text amendment. Mike, would you like to discuss that for us?
Sure. So it was my understanding at the last meeting there was a decent discussion about row homes and townhouses. Now, to begin with, in terms of people have a different definition or a different appreciation of that, I've kind of treated them as the same thing. However, just from what I've gleaned, sometimes people view row homes more as a succession of buildings, usually without too much articulation, and without associated parking either in the front or in the rear yard. And then townhouses considered something more with parking and sometimes either a larger unit or a larger lot if they're freehold lots. So the revised memo that you have in front of you for this package dated June 27th essentially looks into what we have right now for the zoning ordinance. And there's really not much. Essentially, we treat them as a form of multi-family housing, and we don't have too many specific performance standards or design measures included with that beyond a table with regards to what you would find maybe in the R3 for setbacks, etc. So I provided some on the first page, at least demographic data as to what we have right now. I don't know if this would say, hey, it's something we don't have and we should have more of it, or is it something just worth having as an additional housing option for potential developers to use or homeowners. There's always a concern, and I started to receive emails a few weeks back about concerns about tear downs or monster homes. That, could be a valid concern sometimes, where you have someone assembling 2 or 3 lots with maybe 2 or 3 single family, and depending on density and the allowable zoning standards, then making that to 5 or 6 units that are all kind of a row house or townhouse form. So that's definitely a potential concern to look at. But the memo goes on then to make the argument that it's something you see more within the region. Ironically, and again, sometimes people make the argument that you want to have more townhomes because it provides for a higher density. It's a more affordable product for young families. Sometimes you could have a bungalow-style townhouse, which is great for people like myself, baby boomers that want to have everything on the first floor. So on pages 2 till 3 and to 4, you see some just quick pictures of townhomes or row homes in the region. And one of the points I wanted to bring up as it ties back to one of my recommendations, that if we do start looking at this more seriously, one of the big design measures put forward is trying to put forth fairly detailed policies to get away, and it's stated here on page 4, the Berlin Wall effect. And you have that a bit in terms of the existing row homes that we have on Harris Avenue. So attached to the memo, there's 3 pages, and the last 2 pages deal with draft design standards for these things. Typically, for the last 2 or 3 decades, the big qualifying design measures, and again, we have it already in our zoning ordinance, what we talked about for the previous hearing for commercial buildings, is that you want to have more robust or better or more attractive architectural standards. That includes breaking up the facade, having offsets every alternating 2 or 3 units, different roof treatment, different facade treatment in terms of mixing up brick, siding, stone, whatever. You kind of see that with regards to the picture. So everything that I was including here is not for any effort for creative drafting or any brilliance. It's basically just plagiarizing from other municipalities. So these are pretty stock that you will see in other municipalities within the region and around the country, that when you have these things, there is a concern that you could have 6 or 8 units having identical appearances, which you don't want to encourage, and detracts then trying to encourage these municipalities in favor of traditional single family. So there is a way to consider these things in a positive way by just adding more detailed policies to get better architectural standards. So at this point, I think that's what the Planning Commission was asking for, how to treat it. I do not know, and I can't give a valid argument, is it something that we have to do or should do, or is it necessary? But it's something, I think I've seen a couple row home or townhome proposals come through the city, even through the BZA, and it's something that, it could occur more as we move forward, because obviously, the city and a lot of the residents are realizing that housing affordability is an important issue, and the city is getting fairly expensive in terms of the units. And the last argument being that we have decent opportunities with regards to our lots and some of the older homes to upgrade it, and then also up density for these things. So,
Any questions or discussion? Mike, I think one thing I was thinking as I was looking at this was whether allowing this is going to create any sort of parking issues that may be exacerbated in some of the neighborhoods we have. I think particularly when I look on page 4 of your memo, specifically at the middle photo, the Ryan Homes, the street parking there seems, I can't tell if you can park a car in those spaces or not. It may depend what kind of car you drive.
yeah.
As to whether or not you can.
And this is like essentially a rendering, so it's not a real photograph, but it's something, in that case, you have probably an extra long driveway and then the garage flush with the facade. But as part of the treatment of townhouses, yes, parking or off-street parking is a huge concern, because it can be done well, it can be done really, really badly.
Yeah.
And as I recall, the reason the mayor decided that he thought Planning Commission should look at it is because Globe, we have a set on Globe, and the mayor, if I remember, made a distinction between having individual driveways as being one particular type of unit, or having one driveway and not affecting the on-street parking as much, being a different type of unit. But I don't recall which one he defined as which. I know that was a big issue for him, though, was taking all that parking off of a street.
So how do we address that on-street parking? Because we do already have some neighborhoods where on-street parking can be at a bit of a premium.
Yeah, so it comes down to, again, what's the threshold point? So we could say for a townhouse unit, we could just require a minimum of 2 off-street parking stalls as part of that individual lot. And then if it's going to be a condominium or a rental unit, you still have to provide it. Obviously, then it's a collective. You could either have a common parking area or distribute it throughout the development site. But yeah, definitely off-street parking is a concern. So right now, I believe the ordinance does require it for multi, which would trigger.
1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
Yeah, so.
But I think it's for a new-built single-family home also.
Yeah, so I'm looking at whatever the table on whatever 108. So for residential, 2-family or multifamily, 1 for each unit, and then it goes down from there. But again, there's nothing wrong by saying, hey, for this sort of product, we want to see at least 2 or maybe more. I've seen sometimes ordinances were very specific, even down to different sort of apartments. So.
Yeah, and I think, for me, when I think of a townhome, even though they are, or a row home, even though they are very close together, they can still be quite large. I mean, they can still be 4-bedroom units, which is not what you see as often in a lot of our multi-unit buildings in Norwood. You could fit a lot more people more densely than the existing buildings we have. And that's, I think, part of what concerns me with that.
Correct, and again, the example in the memo is probably not the best, because I mentioned it, a lot of these are well over $500,000, approaching $1 million, and they might have 2 car garages, etc., either front or back. But I think I've seen, like I said, even for ones that would have 1 garage space or 1 driveway space, still everything working in terms of the off-street parking and like I said, the big thing is the aesthetics of it. Mm-hmm. But we definitely have a lot of existing streets with fairly narrow right-of-ways, and it's already on-street parking is at a premium. So that's the other thing we have to be cognizant of. Where would we allow these things?
Yeah, when I look in your memo, the ones that are almost in Norwood, but not quite over there on Edwards Road that are being built now, you're looking at the units that are fairly narrow, but still 2,200 square feet. That's a 20-foot lot across. I think the intensity for parking demands could get relatively high very quickly for something like that.
So Mike, so I'm clear on what your draft here that you submitted. Number one, thank you for the backup on, with the pictures and whatever. That's very helpful. But again, the 2 tables and then the language that you've included here. Is this your proposal that you would like Planning Commission to make comments on?
It's just a quick stab in terms of when I went through it as to, at the bare minimum, what would need to be updated.
And I have to be candid with you, I spent more time on the other topic than I did on this topic coming into the meeting. So I knew the matrix would be the big discussion in the medical marijuana, but so I haven't really picked apart this, so I don't really have a lot of comments to give you. If we're not underneath a timeline, could this wait till next month?
Yes. Yes, certainly.
And Mike, but I do appreciate it, and I think because we have Globe in front of us, we didn't have much to really work with on that.
And they took 3 parking spaces off of Lawn Avenue to accommodate at what is an empty lot, but the people on Globe and Hunter used that area of Lawn Avenue because they didn't have places to park. So now there's 3 less parking spaces for them.
So I'm not saying we don't react to this. I'd say let's all of us think about this and get back together on our, hopefully we don't have another
major.
We'll have something on medical marijuana, probably.
So on this, I think my request would be that folks examine this and have any comments or questions to Mike by the 22nd of this month. Is that enough time? And then that will give Mike a little bit of time to make adjustments or to put something together, so hopefully we can have a final product to make a recommendation on.
And you're suggesting, like the mayor had suggested earlier, individually and not as a group to make comments?
Correct. That's an excellent clarification. Your comments should go directly to Mike and not to one another, or to me for that matter. Okay. Any other discussion on that item? Okay. Next item, discussion of next zoning amendment text priorities. I know earlier today we heard about HVAC systems on the outside. Is that something that we'd like to ask Mr. Skelly to investigate a little further?
I think we should. It doesn't come up very often in BZA, but it is, to me, it's a maintenance. People have to replace their condensing units, and I understand exactly what they're saying. Usually you replace them when it goes out.
Right.
So the last thing you really want to do is have to go through a 1-month or 2-month process of a zoning board of appeals.
Yeah,
I do think our building department can handle this if we give them the guidelines.
I think you're absolutely correct. People don't typically call up the HVAC folks and say, "This is working, but I'd like to replace it."
Right.
We all wait until it's not working, and then we call and we want it fixed that day.
At 110 degrees.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. It's something, again, it's kind of dovetailed what we have for the one we considered earlier today. So it's something just taking, and again, most of my homework is kind of done with regards to suggestions here. So.
No, there was one thing in the meeting minutes I had written down here underneath, something about Airbnbs. There was a discussion that something was going to be done and come back to the next meeting. I think it was really on Vic's mind, so I'm just bringing it up because
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Mike wasn't there, and
Yeah, we had a discussion about what would be allowable under the state law in terms of regulating Airbnbs, and I think that's an excellent suggestion.
I mean, we can make it next month. I think there is some, there's some municipalities I know that are getting antsy about Airbnbs, and I don't know, I'm not in that business. I don't know, there's some issues with not getting the taxes or whatever, so.
Yeah.
Candidly, if I lived on a street that had multiple Airbnbs, I don't know that I'd be that happy.
That gives you 2 items to research for us next time? Excellent.
Thank you, Mike.
Anything else we'd like to request, Mr. Skelly? Okay. Being that we are, an hour and 45 minutes into this meeting and the air conditioning doesn't seem to be
I
working
could turn it back
particularly
on.
well. Well,
I turned it off. I wasn't getting the point.
I think
We can either-
you did the right thing by turning it off.
we can either
Meeting would
sweat
go
and hear
faster.
each other, or
I'm happy to run out and get some ice cream and we can extend the meeting.
Well, you can be less formal and take your jacket off.
I would recommend that we hold our new business item for our next meeting.
Agreed.
Everyone agree with that? Okay, so our discussion on mobile food vendors, we will push to our August 3rd meeting. Do we have any communications or miscellaneous? Seeing none, I will actually take a moment just to thank Mr. Skelly for all the work you've done on these zoning amendments. You know, there have been quite a few here. The one that we're recommending to council for adoption is pretty substantial and is a great update, so I appreciate the work you're doing. May I have a motion to excuse our absent member?
Motion to excuse.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mrs. Town, please call the roll.
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Time is now 5:13, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.